Anthony Davis, Donovan McNabb, Isaiah Thomas, Shannon Sharp, Dwayne Wade. These are just some of the athletes who were born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. The area has produced major stars and Hall of Famers in the sports world, but has also taken away some bright young stars due to some of its potentially dangerous neighborhoods and its high crime rate. The violent crime rate is 5.38 per 1,000 residents, much higher than the national average. In spite of this, Chicago also has a bright side, with its great culture and huge market and love for sports. It has an iconic skyline, including the Home Insurance Building, the world's first skyscraper. It's the birthplace of improv comedy and known as the theater capital of the United States, home to over 200 theaters. It has a variety of notable landmarks, from Wrigley Field to the Bean. The Chicago area ranks as the third largest media market in the entire U.S., with a population of over 9.4 million, and it features a thriving sports culture, having a team for all 5 major sports in America: the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, and MLS. On October 4th, 1988, Derrick Martell Rose was born in Chicago, Illinois. His mom was Brenda Rose, but his father was hardly ever around. He grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. This neighborhood experiences an average of 646 crimes per year, and to this day, the crime rate in Inglewood is 125% higher than the Chicago average, featuring high murder rates and gun violence incidents. Derrick had 3 older brothers, Dwayne, Reggie, and Alan. They not only showed him the ins and outs of the game on the basketball court, but also kept him protected from this dangerous area of the city off the court. They built a wall around him, taking control of every facet of his life when they realized that he had special talent for the game. They monitored his friends, schoolwork, and coaches. In a 2006 article from Sports Illustrated, Reggie Rose stated this: "People haven't liked some of what we've done, but when it's your brother, you don't care what other people think." When Derrick Rose was 10 years old in 1998, 2 7 and 8-year-old boys were falsely charged with taking the life of an 11-year-old girl. Brenda Rose had to deal with the overwhelming poverty in an already dangerous neighborhood to raise her sons. In that same Sports Illustrated article, Dwayne Rose said, "My mom would walk me down the street and drag us home if she heard we were getting into trouble. Even the drug dealers, when they saw her coming, would stop dealing and tell her where we were." Eventually, though, strangers would begin to call the Rose house, expressing interest in Derrick. Brenda saw the onslaught coming and knew how to respond, asking D. Rose's brothers for assistance. So they would form a fatherly trio over Derrick Rose, always watching over him to maintain his safety. One would pick him up and drop him off at school. At least one would attend to all Rose's practices and games, and the brothers would handle it if he needed new clothes or shoes. They would monitor who he came into contact with, who would call the house or stop him in the neighborhood, and if none of the brothers were free, they would have someone that they trust to go watch him. Early on, it wasn't too demanding to keep people away, but when Rose got to high school, things really picked up as everyone for Derrick, the Rose brothers would look at how many gang areas he'd have to go through just to get to school, the neighborhoods that would be nearby, and how many friends he might have to look out for him. They eventually chose Simeon Career Academy, a potential safe haven and diamond in the rough. Industrial buildings around the school place a protective barrier for the children from the often rough neighborhoods nearby. An unwritten policy would ensure that children from nearby homes would only be admitted in rare cases. So a kid can't just call his brother or some friends a few blocks away if something happened at school. In 2006, the school's attendance rate was 94%, which was 15 points higher than the average for public high schools in Chicago, showing that kids felt safe at the school. Now, while the Rose brothers trusted Simeon to keep him safe in an academic sense, they demanded a lot of control for basketball matters. There was a public push for Derrick to play varsity as a freshman, but the brothers insisted that he should play with his own class. That way, they could avoid singling him out from the other freshmen. The school's head coach at the time, Robert Smith, stated, "The reality is that when you have a player like Derrick, you have to work with his family." And not only was Simeon good for D. Rose was good for Simeon. The Rose brothers used interest from shoe companies trying to get Derrick to their camps as leverage to get some of his teammates invited as well, creating more exposure for his teammates. Entering his senior year, Rose was considered the 5th best prospect in the nation by Sports Illustrated. The Simeon Wolverines and Rose would have notable matchups with Rice High School and fellow star guard Kemba Walker at Madison Square Garden and against Brandon Jennings of Oak Hill Academy. Simeon would become the first Chicago public league school to win 2 straight state championships, defeating O'Fallon High School 77-54 to achieve the accomplishment. The Wolverines would finish the season with a record of 33-2 and ranked first in the nation according to Sports Illustrated, while Rose had impressive averages of 25 points a game, 9.1 assists, 8.8 boards, and 3.4 steals. Following his senior year, Rose was named Illinois' Mr. Basketball, a member of the McDonald's All-American team and USA Today first-team All-American. He was selected to play in the Jordan Brand All-Star Game and the Nike Hoop Summit. And in 2009, Rose was named the third-best high school point guard of the entire decade by the ESPN Rise magazine, just behind Chris Paul and TJ Ford. His number 25 was retired along with Ben Wilson, who also wore 25, another Chicago high school basketball star who attended Simeon but passed away at the age of 17. In 1984.
Coach Cal had read an article recently.
Rose would accept a scholarship to play at the University of Memphis as a result of that university's history of getting players into the NBA and also a chance of being mentored by Rod Strickland, a 17-year veteran of the league, who was the director of basketball operations. The Memphis Tigers will start out the season ranked third in the nation and began with a 26-0 start before losing to the Tennessee Volunteers 66-62 in February. Unrattled, however, they bounced back and captured the Conference USA tournament with a record of 33-1. Throughout the regular season, Rose would average 14.9 points a game, along with 4.7 assists and 4.5 rebounds. He earned All-American third-team honors and finished as the finalist for both the Bob Cousy Award and the John R. Wooden Award. Memphis would make it all the way to the NCAA championship game against the Kansas Jayhawks, with their Final Four win against UCLA, setting an NCAA record for most wins in a season with 38. Rose scored 17 points in the final and dished out 7 assists, but Memphis lost in overtime by 7. And so, as a result, Memphis finished the season with a record of 38-2. Rose was named to the All-Final Four team and declared for the 2008 NBA Draft.
As it can be.
Now on to the NBA Draft. Despite having just a 1.7% chance of receiving the first pick, the Chicago Bulls would win the NBA Draft lottery on May 22nd. Just over a month later, in Madison Square Garden, the same place where Rose would battle with Kemba Walker as a Memphis Tiger, the Bulls would bring Derrick Rose back home to Chicago. As a prospect, he drew comparisons to Dwayne Wade and Jason Kidd, with his most outstanding marks being in athleticism, quickness, and overall potential. Offensively, it was hard to pinpoint a major flaw in his game. Not only did he have blinding speed and ability to put your favorite player on a poster, he could create opportunities for his teammates also, creating passing lanes and finding shots. Defensively, he looked like a great two-way prospect as well, holding Texas Longhorns guard TJ Augustine to 4 for 18 shooting in the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament, showing off his quick hands, length, and intensity on both ends of the floor. After being selected first overall, Derrick Rose would make an instant impact. He became the first player drafted by the Bulls to score 10-plus points in his first 10 games since Michael Jordan, and he won the Skills Challenge during All-Star Weekend. Chicago finished the season on a 12-4 run and would finish as the 7th seed in the West. Derrick Rose won Rookie of the Year, averaging 16.8 points, 3.9 boards, and he led all rookies in assists with 6.3 per game. In his playoff debut, D. Rose became the second player in NBA history to score 35 points and dish out 10 assists in a playoff debut, as the Bulls narrowly defeated the defending champion Boston Celtics in overtime on the road, 105-103. Ultimately, Chicago would lose in 7, with Rose averaging 19.7 points, 6.3 assists, and 4.9 rebounds during the playoffs. Following the first-round exit, Rose would become an all-star in just his second year, being the first Bull since Michael Jordan to receive the honor. He averaged 20.8 points and 6 assists, as the Bulls finished with a 41-41 record and would lose in 5 to a LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers team in the first round. In the playoffs, though, Rose would average 26.8 points and 7.2 assists, which would be a sign of things to come the following year.
I cannot be the MVP of the league.
Before the start of the 2010-2011 season, Derrick Rose had one question: why can't I be MVP of the league? It would have made Rose the youngest MVP in history if he was to do it, but why couldn't he? Also going into that season, LeBron James, whose Cleveland team had just outed Chicago the year before, he had left the Cavaliers to team up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in Miami. So as a result, the Miami Heat, they were widely seen as the team to beat in the East. But the Bulls would go on to win the conference with a 62-20 record. Derrick Rose averaged 25 points and 7.7 assists. He was an all-star. He made the All-NBA first team, but most importantly, he was the MVP. The Bulls would make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they would lose to that Big Three Miami Heat team in 5 games. Rose averaged 27 points during the playoffs, but on just 39% from the field and 24% from beyond the three-point line.
Here's Coach.
In December of 2011, Derrick Rose would sign a 5-year extension with Chicago for $94.8 million. Unfortunately, that MVP season at 22 years old would be the best that we would see of D. Rose for the remainder of his career. And the regular season, that following year, he would only play 39 games, dealing with various injuries. However, he was named All-Star starter for the second straight year. In the first game of a potential playoff run against the Sixers, Derrick Rose injured his knee trying to jump and was immediately helped off the court. The worst part, the Bulls were up by 12 with a minute and a half left in the game. So realistically, there were arguments to be made that Rose shouldn't have been out there at that point. An MRI would reveal that Rose tore his ACL and he would miss the rest of the playoffs. He had surgery performed with an estimated return of 8 to 12 months. He would miss the entirety of next season too. Despite being cleared by doctors to return in March, he advocated that he would only return once fully healed, so he missed out on that entire next season. But the following year, Rose would return and he would tear his meniscus in a November 22nd game against the Portland Trailblazers. On November 25th, Rose would undergo surgery and the Bulls announced he would be out for the season. And by now, we've reached the 2014-15 season, well removed from Rose's MVP days. This season was his most healthy in years. He played 51 regular season games. And on April 18th, 2015, he would play his first playoff game since 2012, back when he tore his ACL. There were flashes throughout the playoff run of the player he once was, like a 34-point game against the Bucks in round 1, or having 2 straight 30-point games against the Cavs in round 2, but the Bulls would lose to Cleveland in 6. Overall, Rose's explosiveness had declined, and it was clear that injuries had taken a toll on his game. As throughout the year, he averaged just 17.7 points and 4.9 assists. The following season, 2015-16, would be Rose's last with the Bulls. He was relatively healthy again, playing 66 games, but not only did his points and assists per game decline, his efficiency had too. Chicago failed to reach the playoffs for the first time since 2008, and it was clear that Rose's body was not capable of performing the way that it once was. The next few years were the worst of Rose's career. On June 22nd, 2016, Derrick Rose was traded to the New York Knicks. He opted to wear number 25 instead of the famed 1 that he wore in Chicago, as a callback to his high school career. Production-wise, he was solid, averaging 18 points a night and 4.4 assists. However, the New York tenure was marred by controversy. Ahead of the January 9th game against the Pelicans, Rose reportedly flew to Chicago to be with his mother, but he did not notify team officials, and he was fined an undisclosed amount. Rose would also express his frustration with head coach Jeff Hornacek's triangle offense, calling it random and confusing. On April 2nd, 2017, Rose was ruled out for the remainder of the season upon tearing his meniscus in his left knee, and the Knicks missed the playoffs with a 31-51 record. After his New York tenure, Rose's career looked like it was nearing its end in the 2017-18 season. He signed with the Cleveland Cavaliers, but played just 19 minutes a night for them. On November 24th, he took a break from the team to reevaluate his future in the league, with his injury woes causing him to question his desire to even continue playing. On February 8th, 2018, he was acquired by the Jazz in a 3-team trade and promptly waived after 2 days.
Man, I worked my ass off, bro.
After being waived by the Utah Jazz, Derrick Rose would sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He slowly got his rhythm back and averaged 14.2 points and 23.8 minutes a night during the playoffs for them. He would re-sign with the Wolves the following season. On October 31st, his first start of the year for Minnesota, Derrick Rose would score a career-high 50 points. His teammates swarmed him and he received MVP chants from the crowd. It was a great moment and one of the best seasons in years from Rose, finishing 6th in Sixth Man of the Year voting and 8th in Most Improved voting. After reviving his career in Minnesota, Rose would part ways with the team following the 2018-19 season and would join the Detroit Pistons. He was once again one of the best bench players in the entire league, this time placing 7th in Sixth Man of the Year voting. Over these past 2 years, he had scored 18 points a game both times and played 50-plus games each year. While not the same player as MVP Rose, he was turning things around for the better after a stretch where it looked like he was about to be out of the league. And the following season would be the best of his redemption tour. He started the year off in Detroit, but would finish the season back in New York. He finished the season as a finalist in Sixth Man of the Year voting, placing 3rd, and he also got an MVP vote. He placed 9th in MVP voting that year. More impressively, he got a chance to shine in the playoffs for the first time in many, many years, averaging 19.4 points a night and 5 assists in the Knicks' first-round playoff series. This included 26 points and 30-point performances in games 2 and 3, respectively. Following his great campaign with the New York Knicks, Derrick Rose would play 3 more years in the league. Over the next 2 seasons, his games played and minutes would decline in New York. But at the end of games, fans would clamor for the once MVP of the league to come in and play. This marked an era where Rose was really just a fan favorite, and while he might struggle at times to get in games, and when he got in games, he wouldn't have many minutes, but we all wanted to see him succeed, and every year when All-Star votes came around, he would be near the top of fan voting. It showed just his influence on the game and the impact that he had on this new generation of NBA fans for his entire story. But this past year, Derrick Rose signed with the Memphis Grizzlies, partially in hopes to mentor a young point guard with a similar athletic game to him, Ja Morant. On the morning of September 26, 2024, after that season with Memphis, which, it's quite fitting that his last season was with Memphis because that's where he played college ball at the University of Memphis. So in that way, it was sort of a homecoming for him. But on the morning of September 26, 2024, Derrick Rose would announce his retirement from the NBA. Now there's calls for him to make the Hall of Fame once eligible and for Chicago to retire his number 1 jersey. The Bulls announced that they will be hosting a Derrick Rose night in January, honoring the hometown hero who brought them hope they hadn't seen since Michael Jordan. In conclusion, Derrick Rose had a great peak at 22 years old, but he could have been even greater had injuries not gotten in the way. He's one of the most beloved NBA players ever, one of the most influential that we've seen in a couple decades now, and his story is one of perseverance when everything seems to be going against you, and carving out a new role even when everyone wants to count you out. Thank you, Derrick Rose.